they're very similar. I mean, my approach to, I think the first reading of a script as an actor is got to be very similar to the first read of a script from a director. I think when you read a script as an actor, you're seeing the movie. You can't just be seeing a character, because a character exists in a story, in a place, at a time. And that's the world of the script. So I think as an actor, it's the same thing. You're basing, and I'm trying to see him. I'm not, when I'm reading a script, I'm not trying to see me in there. I'm trying to see who this character is that I'm going to play. And that's my image of the movie. And as a director, you're just allowed to make it be that image that you had in your head. You know? As an actor, you're allowed to make your character who you met in your mind there, but you don't have any say really. I mean, depending on your director, you have, of course, creative conversations with everyone. But Heroes, I had the luxury of having a creative conversation from the word go with people that I had chosen to be the people that I was having those conversations with. The designer, the production designer, Dan Clancy, looking at locations, finding the right place for that scene, fighting to make that scene on the platform, the train station, even though it was quite expensive to shoot on a train station platform, but it had to be the platform, you know, finding the right places, being part of all of that. And then with Lindsay McKay, the costume designer, what are those clothes, you know, and I'm no expert about what a lady wore in 1953, but she is, and so we had those conversations, and my imaginings were heightened and built upon by the talent and the skill of all these other people. Martin Ruhr, the director of photography, who I sat with for 2 weeks in the prep. After having known the locations, we just had a whiteboard, and we sat again with quite a lot of coffee in my kitchen, and we drew up like a floor plan of every location. And I said, okay, this is how I imagine it. And I would just draw up where I thought I might be. And you know, say the scene in the bedroom with Dakota. So I said, okay, I think I would stand in the doorway. I might come in and stand in the doorway. And maybe she's sitting in that window. That was a good window. It looked nice if she's in the window there. And then maybe I sit in the bed and she'll come over to the bed. And this was an imagining of the scene that I had in my mind. And we'd draw it up. And then we would discuss the scene, how it should feel. What do we want out of the scene? How do we want to capture it? I was inspired by films like Leviathan a couple of years ago, films like False Majeure. I'm really fired off as an actor, having worked with Woody Allen, where he'll set a frame and allow the acting to be the storytelling. And in those films that I've referenced, there's a classicness about the framing, about setting a frame and allowing the actors to act in that frame is quite exciting. And of course, we weren't quite as brave or extreme as those two films, but it was what inspired what I like to see, how I wanted to shoot a film. So we would discuss that, and I knew that I wanted some of the scenes to be shot in one shot. But which are those scenes and why? And we would discuss those things, Martin and I, and then just draw arrows where we thought the cameras would be. If this was a scene where the camera moves, if this is a scene where the camera doesn't move, maybe we're going to do both and we can decide in the edit. All of those conversations we had in advance. And then always with the understanding that when we got on set, all of that could go out the window. You have to be brave enough to make it alive on the day. And so what would happen on set was, it was quite funny actually, what would happen on set was, and this is something I learned from Danny Boyle in my very early work, something I learned from him was we rehearsed before shooting, but when we were shooting, we rehearsed every scene. And it's sometimes a step that is missed because it takes a little bit of time. But I insisted early on, I said, well, I'll rehearse with the actors alone on the set. It's important to me. So what would happen before every new scene is the first assistant would say, okay, everybody clear the set. It's a rehearsal for the actors and the director. And I would walk on with Dakota, and I would turn to look for the director and realise that it was me. And we shut the door, we were alone. It was really funny. We'd be like sniggering, going, we can do what we like. And we would, and I would always start by saying, this is what I imagined. And we would try it. So I said, I imagined you sitting in that window, and I imagined standing at the door, and we would try it. And if it didn't feel right, we'd change it, and we'd try different things. And sometimes, and it would change as often as it didn't. So sometimes it was exactly as I thought, and there was no need to change it because it worked. And other times it was entirely different. And I was adamant that that's the magic of filmmaking. You can't plan this thing like building a house and execute it. There's something that happens on set which is theatre and which is magic. And you have to be brave enough to allow it to happen. You can't restrict that in any way.